Before COVID-19, only 7% of American professionals could work from home. This does not mean that 7% are working remotely. It means that 93% of Americans have been informed that this will never be an option. Telecommunications are essential today. There is no exact understanding of how many people work remotely around the world, but Cisco said its video conferencing programs in China have 22 times more traffic than before the outbreak. The world is busy with the worldwide work from home test, and we will immediately see how accurately it can be repaired. At the moment, we are focused on this and the results are confident. One of them found that the profitability of telecommuters increased 16.8 days a year. This research has been done all the time because companies don't see the results directly for themselves. And no one will deny that it allows people to continue working remotely after the pandemic. And it can be overwhelming for our lives. The usual desire to work has increased by 20 minutes over the past decade, and experts say those 20 minutes affect productivity, cutting wages by 19%. A couple of months ago, the required total payment turned out to be an unrealistic fantasy. The ability to send monthly checks to every person in the country, whether or not they go to work. The UK has focused on paying 80% of compensation to its workers, while Denmark has offered to pay up to 90%. And even the United States expects to send a check for $1,200 to almost every American adult. None of these plans are actually equivalent to the total fundamental salary, but they are close. This is likely to be a dry test of how these approaches really affect society. It is too early to say what the result will be. In 2017 and 2018, Finland tried to get an all-inclusive basic wage and found that it leaves people wealthy but out of work, which could also be what we find in the rest of the world. Either way, these discussions will be much less hypothetical when the pandemic is over. One of the areas that COVID-19 has hit the most is in mining. Anyone working in a factory is an incredible embarrassment. Telecommuting is not an alternative when you work with your hands. However, in some processing plants, no one stays at home. But for the supposedly disconnected manufacturing factories, which usually work as robots, the disease did not affect the profits of the enterprises. Companies using more robotization are now showing an improvement over those depending on the packaging of the human hands of factory workers. And organizations are starting to take notice. For example, Cardio Robotics reported that the number of requests increased by 25% in the last 30 days. We can expect that very many large enterprises will have to move from human hands to more profitable and faster robotic technologies. China has just begun to supplant vehicle drivers with drones, and they show that they are faster and safer than humans. They even explored various routes to mechanical hospitals where food is delivered by car. Temperature measurement, and of course, remember to disinfect the rooms you're in to protect people from contact with someone transmitting their disease. By the time this pandemic ends, your activity may well be filled with a robot. Schools have closed in all countries affected by the COVID-19 outbreak, and this is forcing guardians to move to teachers in a completely different period of study. Over the next few months, online learning will become the standard. No matter how well informed your instructor is, they will need to figure out how to digitalize training. Based on early replies, it is impossible for us to see the far-reaching allocation of online instructions when this is completed. Until now, criticism from teachers has been absolutely negative. A serious problem is that learning over the internet has many disadvantages. Children whose caregivers lack the ability to nudge them to learn are lagging behind, while those who cannot bear the costs of the internet are completely excluded. However, every instructor on the planet goes through a brief training in teaching the 21st century. They're guaranteed to come back with thoughts that will change the way our children learn. At least for the children who are returning. Many parents are homeschooled, and as self-taught children tend to score higher on tests than children in public schools themselves. There are no libertarians in pandemics, Meghan McCain said recently. It doesn't matter if it's bad or not, however, good or bad, there are plenty of reasons to admit that it's relevant. Ever since COVID-19 began to spread around the world, people have embraced a huge government. Socialist strategies are being implemented all over the world, even in countries led by conservative leaders. The US government expects to spend a lot of money, $1 trillion, to fight COVID-19. While Britain Boris Johnson said there is no limit to how much they will spend. The big government is being renewed, and in some places this is very unusual. The Israeli government began to use its population. Information about the mobile phone zone is recognized by every person who communicated with the infected patient. If you have been close with them, you will receive a message in which you need to isolate yourself immediately. There are libertarians too, but their voices are calming down. Moreover, when the government returns to fashion, there will undoubtedly be a couple of bills that would never have passed before COVID-19. On April 15th, with a pandemic ravaging their nation, South Koreans will have to line up outside tents and cast their vote in the 2020 elections. That would be a huge problem, and the country had no way to respond at all. Up to this point, their response has been terrible. They will expect voters to wear sleeves and disposable gloves. And they will check the temperature of everyone before allowing them to enter. It will be a disaster. We can count on disappointment with voter turnout, and that will worry the rest of the world. This will especially affect the United States, with elections scheduled for November. Americans will have to change their voting rules this year, and we can expect these gains to be permanent. 2 out of 3 Americans now say they feel the stress of voting in person, and some are currently fighting for change. Texas Democrats have said in court that they cannot vote by mail, while various states are urging individuals to send only ballots by mail, which might be unusual for a popular government. The moment Utah mailed the vote, they saw a 7% increase in voter turnout. Many organizations are now hit hard, but not as badly as cafes and restaurants. France, Spain, Italy, Germany and the UK are just a couple of countries that have closed all cafes and restaurants long ago, and in countries that were not requested, for example, in Belarus. Hardly anyone would want to go out. Over the next several months, these organizations and their employees will be deprived of any source of income that does not come directly from the government. Soon, many entrepreneurs will not survive. JP Morgan predicts that small, private companies will be able to survive no more than 27 days. This will change the essence of our reality, unfortunately. The current reality is that small businesses simply cannot survive and will close, and huge organizations will continue to work. When people have an appetite for lunch and dinner, the servers start looking for work again, so McDonald's will run into difficulties, and this will change our world. Currently, about half of Americans work in small businesses, but when that is over, the speed is likely to be much lower. COVID-19 could not have had more dire energy for China. They were in a fierce trade war, and COVID-19 made the situation even worse. Until now, the entire planet has relied on China for its huge manufacturing center. China produces 20% of the world's goods, more than any other country on Earth, and therefore plays a large role in medicine. More than 90% of America's antibiotics come from China, but as China found itself isolated and struggling to keep up, it is becoming more and more clear that it is precisely so dangerous to depend on a secluded area to flexibly influence the world. The whole world is struggling with a shortage of fans, protective masks, and only a very small fraction. It is simply impossible to rely on China to handle this alone, especially when they are. Several countries are now starting to resume production at their own borders. We really have no choice now. We have to rely on other countries, and this will cause huge losses to the level of the Chinese economy long after the pandemic ends. After the Spanish flu of 1918, all over the world, according to creator Laura Spinney, adopted the concept of socialized medicine. This was one of the long-lasting consequences of an incredible worldwide pandemic. People began to realize that the health of the poor had an impact on everyone, and basic conversations began that could spur general health services. There is only a group of countries that today do not have health care for people, but this could be the second factor driving the rest of the world towards free health care. 41% of Americans now say they have a responsibility to promote widespread social security in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, and politics seem to be doing it. COVID-19 has a significant impact on our well-being, but has a much stronger impact on our economy. According to experts from JP Morgan Chase, no more suspicion. Today we have no doubt that the stunning COVID-19 will lead to a global recession, and this will continue for a very long time. The second wave of the pandemic is approaching. A significant part of the population has lost their jobs, and it is not yet known when everything will stabilize. This expert predicts that another 400,000 Americans will become unemployed in the near future. Another investigator admits that 7.4 million people employed in the leisure and hospitality industry will remain unemployed. Poor people will suffer the most. Although office workers already work remotely from home, most of them will be servers and warehouse workers, but there are many people who no longer work for more than 4 months. It will hurt, although, as Schiddel said, human equality was only achieved in difficult times. We have already learned a lot from this experience. Experts predict a second wave of COVID-19 in the fall, and this experience we have received will help us in the future. At the moment, experts foresee a coup. Prominent researcher Katie O'Neill has portrayed this as Occupy Wall Street 2.0. COVID-19 is going to test us. Plus, if we're lucky, our world could be a better place.